Autumn in Illinois, a much anticipated time of year that brings cooler temperatures from the blazing heat of long, hot Midwest summer days. A season of crisp, cool breezes, falling leaves, and warm hearths. The time for the harvesting of crops, accompanied by the sound of combines heard from early morning to long after sunset. Fall harkens the beginning of a new school year along with the ending of mowing season. Leaves will be raked into piles, bagged or burned to fill neighborhoods with drifting smoke. Winged migration creatures begin their journey south as clocks are turned back and the long days of summer slide away. The majestic trees of oak and maple slowly reveal shades of gold, red, and brown before shedding their bounty, decorating the many woodland trails. Their twisted trunks and boughs exposed as the canopies tumble to the earth. The denizens of the forest revealed. Energized. Creatures large and small preparing for the colder months ahead. Days will soon grow shorter and skies will be filled with the warm glow of the autumn haze. Jackets and sweaters will be taken from closets while neighbors gather around backyard fires at night. Despite the dying of days, the finality of this year's season, the arrival of autumn marks a celebrated time for many, and possibly the most beloved holiday of them all. But Prince Prospero was happy and dauntless and sagacious. When his dominions were half depopulated, he summoned to his presence 1,000 hale and light-hearted friends from among the knights and dames of his court, and with these retired to the deep seclusion of one of his crenellated abbeys. This was an extensive and magnificent structure, the creation of the prince's own eccentric, yet august taste. As summer truly begins to fade away and autumn heads into the month of October, the tradition of decorating for Halloween begins in earnest. From jack-o'-lanterns to window clings to more elaborate lawn displays of inflatables and lights, Halloween decorations only enhance the festive feelings of the fall. In the town of Mount Zion, Illinois, lives a mad scientist who takes home decorating to another level.
So most of the year, I teach biology and chemistry at one of the local colleges. But every October, I become the proprietor of the Edgewater Mortuary. The Edgewater Mortuary is, in fact, a free home haunt that I set up outside of my house every year in the yard. It's a yard display that people can come by and look at. It runs pretty much all week long, so from 7 to 10 each night. The mortuary originally developed kind of out of my own interest in decorating for Halloween. Starting, well back about 2003, I began to set up things outside of my home regularly. Originally, I was building props and things, and then what I would do is after Halloween, I'd pretty much break them up and throw them away. Well, after a while, I realized it was kind of silly that I kept throwing stuff away every year. So about 2009, I finally decided, well, I'm going to build props and I'm going to reuse them. So I'm going to build things that are going to be a little more permanent. And I decided on the particular theme that I was going to use was going to be the Edgewater Mortuary. And as a result, I began building props, keeping them. Every year I would add to them to get a few more. And then eventually it's gotten to where it is now with animated props, pneumatic props, all kinds of things that I've learned how to build over the years.
The tradition of decorating for Halloween lies in the ancient celebration of Samhain, where people would create frightful icons to ward off the spirits of the dead. Although modern Halloween is a more festive occasion, decorations still have roots in the symbolism that was used in folklore.
I was kind of concerned about people when we moved into this neighborhood. In 2015, we moved from the Champaign, where I had originally been setting up the mortuary, to Mount Zion. And my first thought was, how will the neighbors accept this? The very first thing that happened when we moved from Champaign to Mount Zion was that I had to take and move the mortuary. It actually was stored in a separate place from the house. And so we got a U-Haul and loaded all that stuff up and brought it over. And I just wondered how people would think about that, as the first thing that moves into the new house is we've opened up the back of the van and we're unloading skeletons and coffins and all kinds of stuff. But as it turns out, the neighbors have been really excited about it. The first year, a lot of the kids would make big circles around the house, like they were afraid to get anywhere close to it, but slowly they would get closer and closer. And now they're some of my biggest fans. They know where all the statues are supposed to be. They know which tombstones are supposed to be where. They have their favorite characters. I know one of the characters I originally had built was a pop-up prop. And that pop-up prop just pops up behind a tombstone. And I originally had planned that to go behind any tombstone. But what happened was the kids started calling it Milton. And why did they start calling it Milton? And I realized it was standing behind a tombstone that year that had Milton written on the front. So now that particular pop-up is always behind the Milton tombstone. As it turns out, most of the stuff that I actually have built is made out of fairly inexpensive materials, some of which is free, scavenged, or whatever. A lot of the stuff is built out of foam, which makes it lightweight as well as waterproof. Some of the animated props, you actually use wiper motors to drive their motion. Some of the pneumatic stuff that I've started on more recently, a lot of that stuff has to be purchased. Those are a little more sophisticated fittings and stuff, but they give a much better jump scare, so much more quick activity than you can get out of the wiper motors. But still, some of the favorite props that the kids have is the ones that are built on wiper motors. Fairly simple motions, a little bit of mechanical skill, a little bit of wood pieces and scrap hardware that I have around the house, and kind of put it together. I always tell people kind of jokingly, I say, it's not a mistake, it's a feature. So every time I make an error when I'm putting something together, I think of it as, well, it's supposed to be old and beat up. So if it's got a little ding or a dent in it, that's good.
The colors that we most associate with Halloween are orange and black. Orange can represent the warm color of autumn skies, changing leaves, and the harvest season. And what harvest season would be complete without orange pumpkins? Black is often associated with darkness, death, and the spirit world, which is all represented in decorations and haunted displays. Other symbols that we associate with the holiday are more harvest-oriented, including scarecrows and hay wagons, corn, crows, hay bales, the moon, and perhaps most importantly, the harvest feast.
The first year we started the Edgewater Mortuary here in Mount Zion, we got about 75 kids that year. The next year it was up to 120 something, I believe, and then we were up to 173 2 years ago. Last year was actually back down a little bit. It was like 143. This year, my wife and I have kind of an over-under bet. We made 150 full-size candy bars that have their own special Edgewater Mortuary wrapping paper. And so that's what the over-under is this year for it. She says it's going to be under 150. I'm thinking it's going to be over 150. And so we'll see if we run out of the full-size candy bars or not. But generally, the kids are very excited. They come up, they tell us how much they love the decorations on the house, and a lot of the kids tell me that they, make a special point to come to the mortuary, so they're not really from like up or down the street or something. They may be driving in from all over or the area, Decatur, and even as far as Forsyth and stuff. Some of them have said, they've kind of made it an annual tradition to visit the mortuary. Every year, pretty much October 31st, I start working on next Halloween. So I'm going to start breaking down the mortuary. Usually I'll take it down the weekend after Halloween. And I've already got ideas of what I'm going to be building next year. In fact, I have a bulletin board where I have my ideas that I pin up there. And every year I'm planning on working on a few more things. And then throughout the course of the year, I'll actually work on various projects, new tombstones, new animated props, those type of things. And I imagine over the course of the year, I'd be afraid to guess total how many hours I spend, but it's a couple of hundred during the year working on stuff. Just before Halloween then, I usually start October 1st. I will put up the first of the props. It's the original Edgewater Mortuary sign that I built many years ago. That always goes out on October 1st, kind of indicates that it's coming. And generally, I try to have it set up by a couple of weeks before Halloween. And it's generally probably about 12, 14 hours total of setup time, taking stuff around the yard, getting all the props and everything out, and then maybe another 5 or 6 hours to get the lighting just right. Every year I put up the Edgewater Mortuary. I'm very excited about it, and I really don't have any plans to not do it in the future. My guess is I'll keep doing it as long as I'm physically able. Obviously, some of the stuff, especially climbing up on the roof and stuff like that, gets a little harder every year, so there may be a time where I decide, well, I don't want to get up there and do that kind of stuff, so maybe I'll cut back. But as long as I'm physically able to put up the mortuary, I probably will.
At morn, at noon, at twilight dim, Maria, thou hast heard my hymn. In joy and woe, in good and ill, Mother of God, be with me still. When the hours flew brightly by, and not a cloud obscured the sky, my soul, lest it should truant be, thy grace did guide to thine and thee. Now when storms of fate o'ercast darkly my present and my past, let my future radiant shine with sweet hopes of thee and thine. The town of Arthur is a well-known Amish community located in central Illinois with a population of around 2,300. According to the Arthur website, approximately 4,500 Amish residents live primarily in the countryside surrounding the village. Visitors are warned to be alert to the Amish buggies that frequent the roadways, as well as to be respectful of the Amish culture. Tourists travel to Arthur year-round to enjoy Amish crafts, purchase sturdy furniture, enjoy simple living from years gone by, and to feast on the incredible baked goods. Arthur has festivals and events for appreciations of all the seasons. But come October, there is one must-see place that attracts people from all over the United States.
I'm Mac Condill, M-A-C-C-O-N-D-I-L-L. I am owner-operator of the Great Pumpkin Patch here in Arthur, Illinois.
The Pumpkin Patch is a Midwest staple attraction for many during the autumn and Halloween season. Patches range from backyards with pumpkins brought in for sale to larger locations where pumpkins are produced and can be cut from the vine.
Yeah, the Great Pumpkin Patch, we're just south of Arthur, Illinois, 2.5 miles. We started 30 years ago. So when I was 12 years old is when we first started the Pumpkin Patch. So we've grown and grown and grown for 30 years. We play host to tens of thousands of people in the fall. And we hope to be kind of the one-stop shop for everything that's harvest-driven. We're very production-based here. Diversity is our main thing. If I had to say one thing that we do, it's all about diversity.
One look on the University of Illinois Extension website will yield a search that will bring up a listing of 90 pumpkin farms throughout the state, with many more small, unlisted patches spread about. What makes the Great Pumpkin Patch so unique is that it is located on a 70-acre working farm. The patch is known for its world-class pumpkin displays that have attracted the attention of celebrities, sports teams, and even the White House.
When I heard that Martha Stewart was starting a TV show, I kind of jumped on that thinking, well, this might be an interesting way to get a little bit more awareness. And this maybe sounds weird, but honest to goodness, one of my missions is to raise the awareness of an underutilized, underappreciated vegetable. So I think cucurbits are an underutilized, underappreciated vegetable. So I try to find stages, figuratively and I guess actually, for them to gain some credibility and gain more notoriety or gain more whatever, you fill in the blank. So to go on a national show, and I knew Martha Stewart loved the fall. It's her favorite time of year. And for us to already be in her magazine, it took, I forget if it was an email or phone call, but I pitched the idea to the executives and they really ate it up. They thought it was, wait, this young guy is gonna bring all these varieties to us in Manhattan and wants to be on the show? Like, this sounds pretty cool.
Before pumpkins were used for making jack-o'-lanterns, the vegetable of choice was the turnip. Burning embers were placed inside carved turnips with the intent to ward off evil spirits and to welcome deceased loved ones many centuries ago during the Celtic celebration of Samhain. Early European settlers found the pumpkin to be much easier to carve and a much better choice for the jack-o'-lantern.
Well, here at the Great Pumpkin Patch, we're known again for diversity. We grow 300 plus varieties of pumpkin, squash, and gourds. And of course, we've got the little mini gourds for decorations. We've got ornamental corn, straw bales, chrysanthemums. We grow all our chrysanthemums here in-house as well. 5,200 different pots that are handled right here. We're a working farm. We have 3 different plantings that we have. So we go outside of the farm to buy in a few things, but for the most part, we're producing everything here, and that's not a common thing anymore. A lot of places you can't go out into the pumpkin patch and pick your own pumpkin. You can totally do that here, and you can have access to 63 acres. So you can get your child with a wagon that we provide and go have a true pumpkin patch experience.
Another great attraction for visitors to the Great Pumpkin Patch are the diverse variety of animals that can be found throughout the grounds. And one never knows what he will see from one year to the next.
Yeah, my mother's a McDonald, so we like to consider ourselves the original old McDonald's farm, which we're not, but we kind of play at that. And so barnyard animals have the clucking chickens in the background. It puts people in a certain spot. And so we go out and we love diversity. We love plant diversity. We love animal diversity. We love cultural diversity. And then, of course, we love cucurbit diversity, pumpkin, squash, gourds, all of those things. But the animals are fun. We go around the countryside and we kind of collect these different critters from, a lot of them are Amish neighbors. And we say, hey, can we borrow 3 little pigs for a few weeks? And they say, well, what's the catch? And we say, well, nothing. We're going to feed them and we'll take good care of them and people will get to enjoy them and then we'll return them. And they say, oh, I have 3 less mouths to feed. That sounds good to me. So, whether it's sheep or goats or llamas, bunnies and chickens, that's another strange thing. There is a sale barn here in Arthur, and they have a sale every month where people bring the unbelievable poultry once a month to this auction. And so you'll find a golden pheasant and a peacock and geese and, chickens from Poland and Japan and, all these funky crazy haired poultry that are, $4 and $6 and $8 a head, where people are kind of, like I used to trade baseball cards on the school bus with the Amish neighbors. It's kind of a baseball card trading thing where people bring their chickens and bunnies and other things. So, it's just, I go there once a year and I pick out what I think are the most exotic or the prettiest or the most unusual, again, going to the diversity thing. Then we bring them out here and give them a fun home and let people enjoy them.
We've got Wanda's Crib. It's been around for 30 years. It's a very subdued kind of haunted house, but it is one of people's favorite things out here. We're not one to get into the gore and all of that of Halloween. We're very much harvest centered, but it definitely is a fun attraction and one that just gives people, opens their imagination.
The 2 Mile Sweet Shop, it was named the 2 Mile because it was 2 miles from the center of a section. This was a building that was getting ready to be demolished. But we at the Great Pumpkin Patch absolutely love to repurpose things. And so if we can take something that was about ready to die and give it a reissue a meaning or a purpose, then we absolutely do that.
And what would a farm be on Halloween without a corn maze? The Great Pumpkin Patch has that and more to help visitors explore the grounds.
Another way to connect people to the land is let them, meander through the land. Again, don't want to hit ourselves over the head with it, but a lot of people live on concrete, asphalt, sidewalk. That's what they feel. And, that's different for your feet. It's different for your eyes. It's a different temperature. It's just strange. So if we can take people from grass to soil to straw to, meandering through growing plant material, we find that as a win. That's a win in our book. It's to get people out into nature, I guess you'd call it. So that's where, a lot of people have different mazes, and they actually pay a lot of money for big companies to come in, and it's all GPS, this and that and the other. Well, we like to grid things out, but I actually have a graduate student who's worked with me since he was in high school in Mattoon, and he does all my maze designs. And we have a certain buffer that we want to have so that you can't see the next, the next aisle away. This is the corn maze specifically. But we go out when the corn's very small, and we cut it out by hand with either a weed whacker or a hoe or whatever. And then we kind of clean it up as the season goes on with machetes and other things. So it's kind of fun, kind of our Indiana Jones, moments with that. But the soybean maze, the kind of immature corn maze, the sunflower maze, these are things that just came to me. They're not groundbreaking, but these are plants that, again, are stiff enough that they provide some sort of architecture, and to be able to kind of carve them up and walk through them, I think gives you another way to experience farming, another way to experience agriculture, another way to experience the farm. And so those are things that you don't often get a chance to do. And we offer that, again, going back to the reconnecting or the connecting of the land. So, we're constantly trying to find ways to bolster the experience of the harvest season and to go back to our agricultural roots that just basic humans had from the beginning.
The most enjoyable part of my job, I think, is seeing the smiles on multi-generation. We're not just a kid-friendly place. I think a lot of people put pumpkin patches and kids together, which is fine, but we're very educational based. We have a lot of adults, retired adult couples that come to just hang out, and to get their feet on a working farm is a really special opportunity, and one that is becoming less and less possible. So for us to open our 6th generation family farm, we've been here since 1859, and to get people out on the farm, experiencing grass and dust and dirt and all these things is a really great feeling for the whole family.
this unnerved, in this pitiable condition, I feel that the period will sooner or later arrive when I must abandon life and reason together in some struggle with the grim phantasm, fear. Alton, Illinois, population 28,000. This historic city lies 25 miles north of St. Louis, Missouri, along the Mississippi River in Madison County. Unlike the flat plains of central Illinois, Alton is situated in extremely steep terrain, and massive limestone bluffs stand along its northern edge. It has a rich Civil War history. Abraham Lincoln and Stephen Douglas held their last debate here in 1858. It was a major river trading town in the early expansion west, and it's considered to be one of the most haunted cities in America according to its website. And there is one person who has been studying the hauntings of Alton for more than 20 years.
Alton has a lot of haunted places, dating all the way back with some of the stories to even the 1830s and 1840s. Elijah Lovejoy, who was they regarded as the martyr to the free press, the very first man killed in the fight against slavery, was murdered in Alton in 1837, and his ghost was said to haunt an old warehouse down by the river where his last printing press was destroyed for years afterward. There are lots of other places. The McPike Mansion, the home of a former mayor of Alton. He built it in 1869 as this country estate. Now it's right in town, but at the time it was very isolated. The family lived there. They had a number of tragedies and deaths that occurred in the house over the years. It's now regarded as one of the most haunted houses in Illinois. The First Unitarian Church in town is one of my favorite spots. I would say for a lot of people, it's kind of the most sinister spot as far as hauntings go, which seems odd because it's a church. But in 1934, the minister who was in charge of the church at the time actually committed suicide in the building. His name was Philip Mercer, and he hung himself one afternoon in the church, and it's believed that he's never left. Now, I wouldn't say all of the things that happen there are negative, but a lot of people who come in are very frightened by that presence in the church. We have brought thousands of people into that building over the 20 years we've been doing tours. And if there's one place that you tell people we can't guarantee you're going to encounter a ghost on the tour, even though we tell them that, this is usually the place where it happens. And another really active spot is the old Mineral Springs Hotel. Built in 1914 as a place where rich or at least well-off people could come and stay, take in the healing waters that were supposed to have been found under the building. Since that time, it's gotten a reputation for being haunted. There are several suicides that have taken place in the building, a couple of deaths, and it's believed that it's their ghosts and perhaps many of the other guests who checked in and never checked out over the years still haunt that place as well.
The beginnings of the city of Alton were a rich and prosperous time due to the trade and manufacturing along the river. This is reflected in the Victorian Queen Anne-style houses overlooking the Mississippi. Today, many of the streets along the lower banks are paved in bricks, and commercial brick buildings dominate the industrial areas of the city. The blue-collar roots of this prosperous time are still reflected throughout Alton. The structures here reinforce to deal with seasonal flooding. Historically, Mississippi flooding has always been an issue, and flood level markings can be seen on the large Ardent Mills silos that loom over the river skyline.
In the 1820s and 1830s, Alton was the largest city in the entire state of Illinois. This was before Chicago had ever found its footing. And so with the population center being in Alton, and it was decided that a penitentiary was needed to lock up all the lawbreakers in the state, Alton was chosen as the site. Construction began in 1830 on the very first penitentiary in the state. This was a place that was even unlike penitentiaries that we know today. Of course, there was no heat, there was no medical care, there was little in the way of food or clothing for the prisoners. So it was a pretty dismal spot, often flooded by the Mississippi River in the spring. Men died there, sometimes one or two of the prisoners died every week. And when men were released, usually their health was so broken by the conditions at the prison, they didn't live long after they left that place. So this prison got a terrible reputation. In the early 1840s, Dorothea Dix, the social reformer, came there and said that she didn't feel that the Alton Penitentiary was fit for human habitation. It was that bad. And eventually, the state legislature closed it down in 1857 and transferred all the prisoners to a new site in Joliet, Illinois, where they were building a new penitentiary. And so this building was abandoned until the outbreak of the Civil War. In 1862, after overcrowding at the St. Louis prisons holding Confederate prisoners, they decided to reopen the penitentiary in Alton, and prisoners were transferred there. Conditions during the Civil War weren't much better than they were when the place was open originally, but now it was extremely overcrowded. With no room for prisoners in St. Louis or now in Alton, they were packing as many as 10 men in cells designed for 2. So the conditions were absolutely terrible. Deaths were occurring on a regular basis. Then in the summer of 1863, a smallpox epidemic broke out at the prison. And depending on which record you read, between 1,500 and 3,000, perhaps even more, men died just during that epidemic. So this was a horrific place, a terrible place to have been in prison. Escapes or attempted escapes happened on a regular basis. Men died from the conditions, from the diseases, the rats, the lice, the fleas, everything you can imagine. This was a horrific, hellish place. Well, at the end of the Civil War, it was finally closed down, and it was left empty in the years that followed. Eventually, the site where the prison was became a public park in Alton, with that prison still remaining at the back edge of this park. People would come there to have picnics and listen to music right in the shadow of the old penitentiary, and it was just too good to stay away from. So people would go exploring. And those were some of the very first ghost stories ever told about Alton, at least the ones that made the newspapers. People went into that empty penitentiary and found it wasn't as empty as they originally thought. They were hearing sounds, noises, voices, screams, cries, weeping, what sounded like gunshots. Some even claimed they saw the apparitions of men in dirty, ragged clothing wandering through the halls or in the cells who would be there one moment and then simply disappear. So these stories got told and they spread and they continued to be told for years. Parts of the prison were torn down, some were removed. Finally, in 1974, they tore down the rest of it, built a monument to the penitentiary and to the men who died there along the street, and then turned that area into a parking lot. You would think that parking lots wouldn't be haunted, but this one is. There have been a lot of stories that have continued over the years of people having encounters in that parking lot with sounds and voices, and most especially with the apparitions. One of the very first ghost stories I ever heard more than 20 years ago when I moved to Alton was from a man who was walking his dog one night right along William Street, right at the edge of the parking lot where the prison used to sit. He said as he was walking his dog down the street, his dog started to bark and act very angry. And he looked over to see what it was the dog was barking at and saw a man walking across the parking lot. He said he was very dirty, had long hair and a beard, and his clothing was all ragged. And one thing he noticed for sure was that the man wasn't wearing shoes, and it was a chilly night in November. And he thought, well, it must be a homeless man. I need to get my dog under control. So he reached down, grabbed a hold of the dog's collar to kind of pull him back over onto the sidewalk, looked up to apologize to the man, and the man was gone. Now, he'd only looked away for a few seconds, and this guy had just disappeared. Well, he immediately went home and told his wife. He knew nothing about that parking lot or the history of it. And she said to him, well, don't you know what used to be there? And then explained that that was the site of the penitentiary and that this is where people had seen the ghosts of the prisoners still haunting that spot. And he had never heard the history before, but I guarantee he never forgot it after that night.
Cemeteries can be both peaceful and beautiful, and many are, but they are also the most obvious sources for ghost sightings and paranormal activity. Tales of the supernatural include orbs, mists, glowing lights, disembodied voices, and full-bodied apparitions. And the older the graveyard, the more likely it is that a hauntingly good story is to be found. Alton City Cemetery has a history that dates back to pre-Civil War and contains a national cemetery for war veterans, including a number of Union Army soldiers. However, according to at least one visitor, not all that are interred here are at peace.
The Alton City Cemetery has kind of an unusual history. It was never really meant to be the city cemetery. It started out as being a small burial ground in what was then known as Hunterstown that was supposed to be set aside for African Americans. The first burial that had some infamy behind it in that cemetery was that of Elijah Lovejoy. After he was murdered in November of 1837, his body was hidden away because it was thought that the pro-slavery mobs, the ones who had come to Alton to try and destroy his printing presses, might do something to desecrate his body. So they buried him in secret and then forgot where they put him. People moved away and died out, and by 1897, when they wanted to do something to honor Lovejoy and put up this grand monument in the cemetery where he was buried, they had to find his body first. So they actually had to contact a man who had been living in Alton that had moved to Scotland, and he was able to provide them with directions to find the body. Well, now it's in a place of honor with a fence around it, and there's a grand monument there, but it didn't start out that way. The edge of the cemetery is sort of, I guess, a bit of a national cemetery in that it is filled with the graves of Union soldiers who died, some who died on duty, some who died during the smallpox epidemic that happened at the prison because men who were guards there obviously contracted the disease as well. Now, there are not a lot of ghost stories about that part of the cemetery where all of these soldiers are buried, but I do know of at least one. And it was passed on to me by a guy who started his story in the way I love stories to start. I don't believe in ghosts, but well, he was there for a ceremony one day and was there with a group of people, and he looked up and he saw a man standing a distance away, the edge of the graves near a tree, who was dressed in a Union officer's uniform. Well, he assumed that this man was there as like a reenactor who had gotten dressed up to come to the ceremony, and went to speak to him after it was over. And as he started walking that way, the man turned around, started to walk in a different direction, and then just sort of faded out of existence. And that's when he realized that even though he didn't believe in ghosts, he'd just seen one.